In a competitive society where men struggle with one another for food and shelter, what is more natural than that generosity when it diminishes the food and shelter of men other than who is generous should be held an accursed thing? Wise old saws, to the contrary, he who takes from man's purse takes from his existence. To strike at a man's food and shelter is to strike at his life. And in a society organized on a tooth and nail basis, such an act, performed though it may be under the guise of generosity, is nonetheless menacing and terrible. This quote comes from the essay The Scab, written by Jack London. Hello and welcome back to the library. And before we get lost amongst the stacks, I want to reintroduce my guests for the hopefully final episode of this absolute epic, the Conqueror of Plymouth Rock, the Ward of Sir Patrick Stewart, the Proctor of Poesy, the only man to ever answer the call of the wild via AOL Instant Messenger, the Wordsmith of Woodstock, the Sorcerer Sonic the Hedgeman, Wolfman Jack's vocal cold himself, a fellow minion of Midas, and the Kingdom King himself, Mr. Andrew Kenney. Sir Andrew Kenney, I think I named you last time. So welcome back, sir.
You've knighted me on this odyssey of ours with Jack London.
I think it's well deserved. So I hope you feel honored. I hope that I didn't cut your shoulder too hard on the blade. And
if Idris Elba can get knighted, so can I. We're both equally as handsome.
Absolutely, yeah. Hold back the James Bond jokes here. Would have been a great James Bond. Let's be real. So
unsung character in The Office.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, absolutely. He's hilarious. He's a good comedic actor. Holy crap. Well, this is an achievement of the podcast. We're on the 49th episode, right? I thought this was the 50th, but I counted wrong. So far, I've made enough money off of donations to help reserve seats on one flight, one way, in order for my wife and I could sit together. So there we have it. Our small child could be passed on our lap because those are listening and are thinking it's bizarre and dangerous that anybody under the age of 2 can sit on their parents' lap in an airplane. Yes, they just don't put planes accessible for little kids. Still, thanks for those who donated. This is a milestone. I'm justifying continuing these works of scripts, recording, editing, uploading, and doing what I despise above all in the world, being active on social media. So no matter how minimal this podcast presence actually is, thank you for everybody. But like we left off last time a little bit earlier, this conclusionary episode of this series, I have two things that I want to note on the top. Obviously, Sailor on Horseback is Jack London's biography written by Irving Stone, and the many writings of Jack London himself, including his memoirs, letters, essays, and fiction work. And second, this is more important. I want to clarify that we're talking about something called the scab, and I'm not referring to something that grows back when you have a deep cut. When Jack writes an essay called the scab, we're talking about the worst one, the one that nobody wants to be.
He's picking it.
Yeah. So that being said, do you have any questions before we leave off? Do you remember where we left off? Because I had to re-listen to the last episode to figure this one out.
Well, we were talking about how the boat went, tits up pretty much, and that we were implying that this was probably something that led to like his health and issues amongst that.
We're going to get to his health, but yes, the Snark did finally get set sail on April of 1907 after nearly 2 years and $30,000 worth of cost, to the chagrin of London's creditors. Right, it's $1 million today.
Right.
And the Snark was in shambles to begin with. We mentioned everything that was wrong with the boat in the last episode. However, we're going to mention a little bit more now. He also ran in trouble with most of his members of the crew, immediately. It turned out, so he hired a navigator, a man named Roscoe Eames, who I believe is Ninetta Eames' husband. Ninetta Eames is his aunt-in-law, right? It's his wife's aunt. Yep. He never bothered to learn navigation, not even a little bit. Even though he got fired. I know, right? Imagine a man being hired to do a job and never learning its skill. Yeah, never happens.
Bus driver without a license.
Yeah. He was also the person who was responsible for building the boat that before Jack took over. So, it runs, I guess, there's a steady stream here of work history. Early on the trip,
Uncoolness.
yeah, right. Early on the trip, all he'd do was hang out in the food storage room and eat all the food that hadn't been spoiled. When Jack asked him why he wasn't swapping the deck or doing any kind of cleaning or whatsoever, he complained it was due to a bad case of constipation. Jack's wife, Charmian, ended up being a huge help, actually. She was also supportive of this trip and turned out to be an excellent navigator on the wheel at some points. Jack was also a huge and hugely decent, or just a really good navigator himself. So they weren't just aimlessly floating in the Pacific Ocean, but things could have been worse, but they could have definitely been better. The ship made it to Hawaii in about 4 weeks, and they docked at Pearl Harbor, where it was made famous by the arrival of Snark, and nothing else ever happened in Pearl Harbor ever again. Throughout all this travel, Jack kept his 1,000-word-a-day pace in writing too. He wrote to build a fire, for instance, which we quoted from in the third episode, and his autobiographical novel, Martin Eden, during the trip, which is considered another masterpiece and sold really well at his time of publication. I didn't read this one specifically because it's one of the longer ones, but I read the experts. It's really, really good, right? It's like where you get a lot of his stuff when he for instance, skipped a bunch of his schooling, specifically high school, to just go to college. This is like that era. Yeah. In Hawaii, he was received as a celebrity. He even had a reception with Prince. Oh, I'm going to absolutely butcher this. Kalanianaola. Kalanianaola. Dude, he was the sovereign and the king of the Kingdom of Hawaii until a bunch of American businessmen overthrew him because it was a neat place to grow pineapples. Jack would also hang out with lepers, literally, where he hunted and fished with them and wrote a sympathetic article that was well received. Jack spent the first 2 weeks on land doing basically Jack London shit and never really returned to the boat. When he did finally return to the boat, he found it hadn't been cleaned or hosed down once the entire time. This is Hawaii. This is the tropics, right? Shit started growing foul. So
Hmm.
he fired the people who were supposed to be responsible for this, specifically the old rapscallion Roscoe Eames, and then somebody else, right on the spot. And eventually, all the original crew was fired and replaced with competent sailors while they were in Hawaii. The only people who weren't fired were his wife, Martin Johnson, and his Japanese cabin boy was also replaced. So, you
Oh
know,
no.
some of the invaluable assets, right?
It's like hilarious to fire someone on like a trip. Like I guess you could get fired in worse places than Hawaii, but still it's like, how am I getting back?
That's a you problem, bro, right? Kind of situation. Like, I have no clue. Nobody cares. Yeah.
Start
Um,
swimming.
yeah. I think for some of them, he paid for their voyage back, Roscoe Eames almost certainly did. We'll get to some reasons why right now, basically. But yeah, imagine getting well, it happens all the time with cruises and stuff like that. Not necessarily fired, but people don't get back on their cruise after they docked and forget oh, I'm supposed to be back at this time, and or else the ship sails and it's kind of on you.
Yeah.
So
Oh
yeah,
shucks, I'm stuck in Bermuda. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Except these places know if you're stuck there, right?
Right.
Can't just disappear in Bermuda.
You need your shorts.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many great stories, and this is such a sidetrack of I know it happened in soccer a lot, but when rugby started opening up for people who after post-Soviet war countries, specifically Romania, but Romania were playing teams in England and in France. Those club teams from Romania who were really good, just people disappeared, and never heard of it again because they just never showed up back in Romania and didn't have cards in like France, and they were there on like a short-term visa. Like, it happened so many times that I can count it on two hands. It's like a thing that happened in
That's
sports.
that's
It
10
happened like
digits, folks.
yeah, in the NHL, like that's how like a significant number of players in the '90s came to the United States and never came home, right? Like from Russia. Um, but I digress.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
it's a good thing that like the London's were competent navigators, and they also hired competent navigators this time because they spent 2 months in the Pacific before they reached their next destination. It was due to the boat being an absolute piece of shit. Jack London and the crew he hired traveled throughout what we would know today as French Polynesia. They ended up in Tahiti, where Jack got a mixed bag of news. His novels were selling really well, and in 1907 would mark yet another time where he'd have 3 books published in one calendar year. However, since they were multiple times where they were stuck at sea moving so slowly on the Snatch, newspapers began to publish that the ship had sank and everybody had died and drowned specifically. It got to the point that the bank that held Flora London, so Flora, his mother, mortgage, foreclosed on the house. Before Jack left, he had given power of attorney to Ninetta Eames, and that proved to also be a completely financially irresponsible decision. She doubled her personal salary, put an extension onto her house that cost thousands of dollars that Jack didn't agree to pay for because he eventually did come out of his money, and kept charging Jack rent for the room he hadn't been residing with in the whole time that he technically was renting, because he had like all this property next to hers, but he didn't have a house or anywhere he could live. You see, Jack had not yet built this house that he wanted to live, this dream house that we're going to talk about in this episode. And he could be definitely blamed for this too, but he surrounded himself with some financially rapacious people for sure, right?
Hmm.
Like, everybody around him took money from him. Um, he just needed a good accountant to be responsible for his money because he was making a boatload of it, pardon the pun. It's not known how he had paid for the voyage, but he did eventually, once he get to Tahiti, paid for a passage back to Oakland to sort out his financial difficulties and publishing affairs, and then came right back to Tahiti to rejoin the crew on the Snark. They then traveled the islands in the South Pacific, hitting the current rugby hotspots, such as the Fiji, where somehow that captain, that one that he hired again, grew weary of the voyage and just simply didn't return to the trip. He just disappeared into Savu, the capital. No one knows what happens to him. He just disappears within history, which I guess I made the joke that you couldn't do that in Honolulu, but Savu is a lot smaller, so we'll see. Yeah.
Just just a little
So,
walkabout in Fiji.
so you know what Jack did? He looked into the mirror, stared into his own eyes, and he said, "Look, I'm the captain now." The crew would risk dangerous storms and some unfriendly people, like when Jack relays a story that being quartered by cannibals, but escaped unharmed. Honestly, this could have been just propagated by white colonial racism because that people like that, but mostly he was welcomed as a guest and celebrity. This was quite literally the peak of colonialism. And many of these islands are being physically and economically subjugated by European nations and the U.S. So the language that Jack uses in these stories that he's saying is very positive about imperialism, which is worth mentioning and not repeating because it's very negative about the people of the islands. That's to say, I wouldn't say negative, but it's definitely negative. I would say it's very racist for sure, but like the word I'm looking for is just like stereo
Condescending.
condescending. Yes, absolutely is the word I'm looking for. Yeah, yeah, because of course it is. It's imperialism. This being the South Pacific, there's a significant risk of catching any number of tropical diseases. You know, Somewhere in the Solomon Islands, the whole crew got malaria. So add that to the petri dish of diseases Jack finally gets. Malaria sticks with you for the rest of your life. Like, you get like recurring bouts of it for decades after you first get it if it's left untreated. There were multiple points where like 5 of the 6 crew were too sick to navigate, and only one person would be able to steer the vessel. Jack would break out into sores the size of quarters because of it. Jack was also the boat's doctor, according to his own memoirs. Of course, Jack was drinking the entire time too, so like, he's sick and he's drunk.
Well, he's got all the medicine he needs.
Sure, yeah. Now, Jack claims that he was abstemious in his memoir, John Barleycorn, at certain points of the trip. But he also then goes on multiple page explanations on how much drinking and ultraviolet rays of the South Pacific affected him. So, like, I'm just going to go with the fact that he wasn't. What is certainly true is that the longer he was away playing Captain, Dr. Sailor, the more his financial affairs were in disarray. Much of this caused by Ninetta, to be fair to Jack. Now, like, I have a long quote here. I'm just going to skip most of it. Basically, Ninetta would, like, try to get his stories published in multiple different magazines all throughout the world. She would sell a story to an English magazine, and then his agent would try to sell it one to a New York one, and in the process, they're both selling it at the same time, or vice versa between America and England. And then one magazine would be like, no, we want the copyright, we paid for it, and they felt cheated out of it. So long story short, like, it was just a complete and total shit show. Ninetta began, and this is my favorite quote, Ninetta began hawking stories and articles as though they were fish, unquote, because they needed to pay the debt, right? Yeah. Frankly, she fleeced Jack out of a ton of money. She did unnecessary projects around his house that had shoddy quality, like a stone wall that cracked during a minor earthquake. Years later, Jack found out the wall was hollow, save for the few beer cans and lunch scraps that were left inside the wall because contractors needed to throw out their trash. Yep. She then doubled her salary.
The old spackle and toothpaste covering the holes.
I mean, toothpaste and spackle and drywall is a sturdier thing than freaking plastic wrapping. I guess it's before plastic wrapping, but like beer cans, yeah.
It insulates it.
That brings back memories.
Yes. 8 by 12 pieces of white paper that beautifully match the walls.
I'll never forget when Bork just decided that he knew where all the doors were hidden, and he just took a bunch of them, and he never had to pay for doors ever again. Yep.
when they Shawshanked the house. We digress.
We digress. So Ninetta then doubled her salary again and charged even more additional rent to Jack on the wings she built on her property out of her own money.
That's awesome.
No.
If it didn't suck, that would be like hilarious. Like, if it wasn't like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe he deserves a small amount of it, but probably not.
I mean, he's making this money, really. Like, he's working hard. That's for sure. She's just fleecing him. And like, she's like indirectly related to him on top of everything else. So it's like nuts. The only thing that really saved him from bankruptcy was one day Ninetta pulled something that was a large sale. She serialized his longest novel to date, I believe, Martin Eden, in the Pacific Monthly magazine for $7,000. Still, she then purchased Jack 2 properties next to his own land without his consent for an additional $30,000, which she mortgaged through a bank. He now owned 240 acres of land just north of the Bay Area, like just north of Oakland.
Nice.
I know, right?
I'll put it to good use.
The long voyage and unknown number of easily communicable diseases finally caught up to Jack and crew. Jack's skin started to literally peel off his hands in layers, and his body started to randomly convulse. He feared going up on deck in case he had to hold onto something as if it would cause excruciating pain to grip something. In September of 1908, the Snark docked in Sydney. The doctors were flummoxed at his condition. He stayed in the hospital for 5 weeks and left only when they said they didn't know how to treat him. He spent 5 months in Australia, in and out of hospitals around the Sydney area, unable to write, so unable to work and make money, which is the first time in nearly a decade he didn't write 1,000 words a day consistently, really. In the March of 1909, he set sail on the Snark and made it to the Solomon Islands, where he sold his boat for $3,000. It would be used later and confirmed as a slave vessel within the islands, which is ironic for the world's leading socialist, right? It's crazy, just wild. He returned a broken man, an insurmountable debt, and the press either hating him or completely disinterested. So there came a saying now that Jack started his stories with 3 characters and ended up killing all 4 of them. Yeah. He
That's a pretty good line.
I know, right? It's really, really good. He convalesced and found out that his hand affliction was almost certainly due to the UV rays constantly hitting his skin. So really, really bad sun. It was sun poisoning to an extreme, and an added dehydration due to heat exposure and heavy drinking. He would get back into California. He was 34 years old. He had already become a millionaire multiple times over through his own writing. He's pretty much like our age, dude. I didn't even read into this or let out like a massive sigh when I typed that at all, but like I did. He was what many right wingers want to be effectively, and that's like something that like was able to make millions by his own hard work and intellect, and not some dude in a microphone spewing controversial opinions who is funded by like one sole billionaire to spread hatred and cause political divides amongst the lower classes. That's what I wrote.
You still talking about sun poisoning?
I know, right? He was in fact still a devout socialist and will like be for the rest of his life. And we're getting to the point where his views on race start to change, thankfully. And if you don't know what this meant, like go to the second episode of this 5-part series. If you wanted at the end, question is why? Well, for Jack, no money meant no journey around the world, which meant that he could not sail up the Seine and tie his boat in Notre Dame, which meant that, he went ambitiously nuts. As we continue our narrative back in California, Jack in Glen Ellen, he dismisses Ninetta Eames, right? His wife Charmian's aunt and his former editor of the first magazine that really published Jack London. He was a nice guy, though, and he still purchased her a piece of property next to theirs with a house to live in on. Jack continued to rent from her because, well, he owned all this land, but there was no house to live in, and the barn had not been repurposed yet. He needed to build a house, but he also needed a place to live, obviously, beforehand. Jack found favor again in the press by publishing a handful of stories about the North and his travels around the Pacific. He was just skating by because his expenses were immense. He still hired a large workforce to build what would be his final home and resting place that he dreamed of, called the Wolf House. The guy loved wolves a lot, and then fell into a cycle of buying pretty much all the property around, including a 400-acre vineyard. His sister finally stepped, who raised him, Eliza, remember her? Now in her late 30s and just separated from her 71-year-old husband, because Jack needed financial aid from her, really, just to take care of like his finances, not that she's giving money to him. His wife, Charmian, then became pregnant. Jack was certain it'd be a son, but his third daughter was born June 19th, 1910. Unfortunately, she passed away only after 36 hours. The couple were obviously devastated. Jack would grieve by drinking, and several days or weeks, not sure of how long afterwards, he got into a physical altercation in the bar owner because he thought Jack was illegally posting bills on his building, like bills by like posting pieces of paper. Jack had the man and the four other goons involved arrested, but the judge then dismissed the case because he called it a drunken street ball, which there was a time, I guess, that would have been a good enough excuse. Like it probably was a drunken street brawl. It turned out the judge also owned the building and leased the bar to the bar owner. When Jack found out about this, he wrote one of his infamous tirades against the judge, and it had published in newspapers all around the Bay Area. Now, this is pretty funny because like he's just really, really petty about this stuff, and he constantly reaches out to people that he doesn't like and just disses the shit out of him. This is pre-Twitter. He would have been amazing online, I think.
The 50 cents of his time.
Yeah, I didn't write the quote, but like it's just constant with him. You think about just a person who's, you know, chronically online and is very good at dissing people and reactionary. The reason why Jack could coast by financially, though, somehow, is he was still earning somewhere between $750 to $1,000 per story in 1910 money. That's a shit ton of money, not adjusted to inflation. I just submitted a story recently, like when I wrote this, for a top prize in a contest in 2026, and that top prize was only $700. I didn't get it, obviously. I would have told you if I did. Jack would live in a refurbished barn on his vineyard until the Wolf House was finally completed. Along with Charmian, his Japanese servant Nikita, and his dog Brown Wolf all together. Again, he loves wolves. He's a bit of a Wolfman, Jack.
Did you say the manservant's name was Akita?
Boy servant, but yes.
Oh, right, yeah, of course. When he turns 16, he has to find a new boy wonder.
I think this one he's the best towards. Like he treats him as a son at the end of the day. But yes, like he does fund his college education at one point. But yeah, not all of them get a college education.
No, some of them just get fired.
Yeah. Jack was like an incredibly like social person to, you know, like he hosted anybody and everybody at his vineyard. He loved hosting, and it would end up being a popular stop, if not mandatory, for anybody traveling across the Western United States to have intellectual conversations, drink wine, and then get silly pranks played upon them by Jack London, which he became notorious over. He loved playing pranks. He very much like ended up being an Ashton Kutcher of his day, except intelligent. His favorite to play to particularly stingy people was to have somebody bang on the floor from the basement, and then people all around them start screaming, "Earthquake!" specifically to people who weren't from the area.
That's good, because it's not like natural disasters ever impacted his life whatsoever.
I think that is a bit of trauma there, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's good fun, honestly. The descriptions of this time sounds like an absolute blast, honestly, and a personal dream of mine at certain points. Jack was overall a jovial dude, soft-spoken for the most part, until he began arguing the tenets of socialism, and he really, truly loved his own life. Like he loved being, you know, the person he was, writing, drinking, and having friends over. Jack considered the happiest day of his life was moving from the city to the beauty ranch in the Valley of the Moon, where he was located. He also claims that he had given up drink again, but that's probably not what happened, and definitely didn't last long. And I guess I'm being skeptical about whatever he says, but there are going to be further passages later on in the script that I think will back my claims. He owns a vineyard, right? Like, and this isn't the type of grapes that, like, you know, you're in this part of California that you're eating specifically. The only time I think he didn't really drink was during the long voyages at seas, and that's because access to liquor. He was a whiskey, beer, and wine drinker most of all, if you were curious. I know some people were. Jack's lifestyle and writing process was kind of nuts. So we're going to have a first quote describing from his memoir of John Barleycorn. But before we go, we're kind of in a half an hour in. Do you have any quote questions right now? Any quotes, anything of that sort?
No, I mean, once again, it's like we know it's coming. We know he dies young, but it's like the more we talk about it, I'm like surprised he hasn't already died. Like he just gets hit with every kind of ye old disease, just every shit situation. And then it's just like, all right, gonna dust me and my empty wallet off and continue on.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that always surprises me is how he can just pull money out of his hat. I don't know, like it's just absolute nuts.
He would,
Um,
but he probably had really bad hemorrhoids.
Man, probably, honestly, all the shitting diseases he ends up getting. Um, so Jack's, this is about his lifestyle and his driving habit. This is a quote from his memoir. Quote, as I succeeded with my writing, my standard of living rose and my horizon broadened. I confined myself to writing and typing 1,000 words a day, including Sundays and holidays, and I still studied hard, but not so hard as formerly. I allowed myself 5.5 hours of actual sleep. I added to this a half hour because I was compelled. Financial success permitted me more time, unquote. We've discussed his habit of typing 1,000 words a day, in his early 20s, and he continued to do it. Toward the end of his life, he was so efficient at this that he was writing that and could crank it out in half an hour. He only slept that 5.5 hours, basically a consistent habit, which is frankly another unnecessary wear on his body. Would be awakened by his Japanese boy servant by 5 a.m., often exercise in the morning, review the previous day's work, which Charmian then typed, often without grasping of the significance of it, then write his daily 1,000 words and be done by work by 11 a.m. the latest. Obviously, he would lunch and then he would get to read some of his mail during and afterwards, which he was getting tens of thousands of letters, sometimes per day, and would often answer hundreds per week. That's a lot of money on postage stamps alone. I think this is just all you need to know about exemplifying his fame, dude. Like he was super famous. When Jack socialized outside the ranch, he rode his horse to Santa Rosa, which back then was considered a particularly conservative town at the time, where many inhabitants thought he literally was insane for his politics. Literally. Things have changed since then, but I can imagine going through certain parts of the country, if I went on horseback especially and start spewing socialist things, I think I would be thrown in the loony bin. His drinking buddies there, specifically one man named Ira Pyle, not Gopher Pyle, Ira Pyle, which I assume is his cousin, and it would say this about him, and this is quoting his biography, quote, I could never claim that title. No one could. Jack stood in a class by himself. He really was two-fisted. He took 4 or 5 drinks before my one. Funny thing, though, 85% of the conversation at the bar was about socialism. He came into Santa Rosa because he could get the best arguments there. People didn't like him because he would say things in the presence of judges, chambers of commerce, executives, and businessmen about how corrupt they were and the capitalist system was. In all the years he came into Santa Rosa, I never heard anyone agree with him. When I say him a stickler about the new socialist state, he would think for a moment, shake his head and say, wait until I get another drink under my belt, and then my mind will flow more freely. The next drink always did it, and he would be off on a discourse about how little commodities would cost the consumer when they were produced for use and not for profit, unquote. So, just this is legendary status of
He
so
just
many
rode
things.
into town to stir shit up and drink their booze.
He's paying for it. He's definitely helping, and he's probably purchasing it for them too. Yeah,
That's hilarious.
it's it's like calling out corruption when you're drunk in front of people probably would get you shot in some places. But Jack London, he was a professional shit stirrer. It was around this time in 1913, Jacques published the memoir that I've quoted a lot, John Barleycorn. The title of it is based off a Scottish folk song that personifies alcohol from its ingredients, barley corn. He also personifies alcohol by calling it the noseless one, which I never really understood why. Like, I got some explanations, but the noseless one probably would have been a better thing for something like oh God, syphilis, because that's what happens when you have advanced it. But like, whatever. John Barleycorn is better. I mean, it literally is. You lose your nose. So, yeah, I guess you
Oh,
don't. Yeah,
Voldemort had syphilis. Good to know. Way to leave
probably.
that out.
Yeah, right. Imagine that's the stereotype that actually came into the and everything else wasn't. uh,
Listen to an
it be,
episode on J.K. Rowling with Phil and hear more about that.
yeah, I did not mention any of the stereotypes that were involved in there because they're sus, but they're not like proven. It's that's all I can say. That there's also insane slander laws in the UK. I wouldn't get I wouldn't have to worry about them, but like, yeah, you just don't say things are certain ways because you get sued like up to your belly button with stuff.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah. That being said, J.K. Rowling doesn't need slander laws. You just have to copy and paste a handful of her tweets.
Uh,
Um,
did you ever
yeah,
read any of her when she was writing those books under the fake name?
no, I never did. Mostly because like I just I mean, she was a kid's novelist and I grew out of it,
Yeah.
and then like then she became her like
Yeah. This was
yeah
luckily, thankfully, or I guess unfortunately before her, but I read the first, it's like Corman Strike books, or they're like very British mystery books, very different than Harry Potter. You could see why they were confused when they found out who actually wrote them. But anyways, digression
yeah
on digression.
yeah. I mean, I usually that's a genre like I read only like the top hits for, which is
Right.
yeah, fair enough, right? Like can't read everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, John Barleycorn became an incredibly popular book in its introduction, and like it's basically a tale of Jack London traveling on horseback to cast a vote for women's suffrage to be added to the Californian Constitution, and his argument is that if there was women's suffrage, the women will vote for prohibition, and that's how it's introduced. And then from there on, he talks about his life of alcoholism. This is both an entertaining and like truly sad recollection of his life as a drinker and a constant denial of his alcoholism. It is also the first time in history where the descriptions of something that's called quote white logic quote of alcoholism after drinking occurs. It's like it's not racist. What like white logic of like clear thinking, like you when you get drunk enough, you just do something, right? Like impulsive, and that's what it means,
Yeah.
right? Like it just feels clear. It's like, oh no, this is just makes the most sense in the world right now because you're intoxicated. It also the popular hallucination of pink elephants after hard bouts of drinking occurs in this literature, which is now not uncommon, but in hard drinkers, but though like it's only known through detoxification, right? Like, so if Jack knew about these pink elephants, he probably had seen them himself, or at least was around people who have seen them. And it's a common thing where, like, you're having the shakes, like you're having seizures, like it's really a bad time. His publisher warned about the reaction people might have reading a memoir that was so alcohol laden, especially since the temperance movement was gaining serious momentum in the US of motherfucking A. But Jack doubled down and said that he always wrote honestly. Why would he stop now? And it proves that he drank more, in my view, like this memoir than he admits, because he's still trying to undersell it. And like, dude, like at the end, it's just like it's one of the saddest memoirs I've ever read in my life. Not like in the sense that the contents are in there, just the denial is nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like the amount of prohibition that it's in there, it's just like I don't think you want this. I think you just need help. So like this is before I have a long quote on this. Any reaction to this? Like because there's something that personifies alcohol that Jack London does.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that it's like if it is true, which I'm sure it is, it's like he talks about like, oh, I write truthful. Why would I do anything different? And then he's like, what do you mean? I only had one or two a week shelves, but the old Ron Swanson. Like, so it is kind of like he was so brazen and truthful and spoke his mind, but then the true vice that he has, he probably pumped the brakes on, which makes it even, like you said, probably means that it was even worse than you can imagine if that was the thing that he wasn't fully sharing the truth on.
Yeah. I mean, there are other things that like he clearly wasn't sharing truth on too, and we'll get to it. But this one is just like really like I think there was just a level of egregiousness that is just like, man, like reading through the lines here, between the lines. I you know, I guess I got to like Jack London through John Barleycorn, and by the end of it, I just went, man, this is some self-reflection that really is tough. Um, yeah, and this is a good quote from that quote. I draw the indictment home to John Barleycorn. It is just these, the good fellows, the worthwhile, the fellows with the weakness of too much strength, too much spirit, too much fire and flame of fine devilishness, that he solicits and ruins. Of course, he ruins weaklings, but with them, the worst we breed, I am not here concerned. My concern is that it is so much of the best we breed whom Jarom Barleycorn destroys, unquote. So I'm going to move hard from this topic because I think that was a great quote, and I don't want to talk about alcoholism anymore. Um, but otherwise, do you have any reflection on that? Because, yeah,
No, it's a
it's
good
true.
end.
Yeah. So Jack had all this farmland, right? What do you think he did with it?
Oh God. He I would say he built houses on it. He tried to become, farmer, captain, navigator, writer. He's like, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, but you tell me.
He discovered that the previous owners didn't do anything to treat or compost the soil, so he vowed to revivify the land. He would invest all his available time, resources, and research into creating what would be known as a model farm today, and he was a pioneer at that. They weren't really entirely new back then, but they were pretty new over there, and now we see them all over the Green Mountain State, right? Like these are just like testing ground farms about like new experimental great technology for and like practices in farming. And again, another thing that he just did that like changed how things went. The success level is a different story, but he
Yeah.
attempted it. Convinced prohibition, however, would happen any day and with his lifetime, which it never did, he tore down all the vineyard, basically the entirety of it, and planted eucalyptus trees as a 20-year investment for their wood. Now we know, and this is something I've learned recently, is that eucalyptus trees are highly flammable and require fires for regeneration. So we also have Jack London to partially blame for the increased Californian fires.
Yeah, that's why
Yikes.
that's why Australia gets fucked and you see all those koalas on fire.
Yeah, no, and a lot of these trees come from Australia, right?
Right.
It's rough. Jack would also hire anybody who came knocking on the door, which happened so often, and most of the time they were paroled convicts from the local San Quentin prison. Before it was a dope concert venue for Johnny Cash, convicts who were paroled from San Quentin and then further out to Folsom Prison
I,
needed.
I just got the reference. It took me a second.
No worries.
Their
They
favorite
needed
color is
jobs to keep.
blue.
Yeah, well, he was not a man in black. It's pretty rough to be a Californian and wear black all the time. Um, these convicts
Ah.
needed a job right after they were paroled, and Jack would get tons of letters begging for employment. Uh, like one of which, and this is my favorite, was quote, "Don't worry, I won't steal anything. I'm just a murderer." Um, Uh, he made a policy that any man who asked for a job at his door would get at least 3 days' labor and pay, and he stuck to it as much as he could. He employed 100 workers on both the farm and house at any given time at this point, which is In the status of the state we live in, that's a large business,
Mm-hmm.
legitimately, right? That is a lot of money being spent in wages alone that he spent. At this point in 1913, Jack was making $75,000 a year and spending about $100,000 a year. That's an income of roughly $2.5 million in expenditure of $3.3 million in 2026 money. He was the best known, best paid author in the world, and his work was being translated to dozens of languages, which, while he was alive, Jack had now developed a messianic complex with his money, giving money to anybody who would ask for a reason. He would do baller things like go into Johnny Heinhold's First and Last Chance Saloon, his his stomping grounds. Remember Johnny Heinhold's? And
Yeah.
take a drink out of a brand new bottle of whiskey and then say to Johnny and tell his boys that London's been here, leave a $5 bill for the whole bottle, and then get out of there, right? Like, that's one of the things he did, right? I have a very long quote that I have to cut in half. I'm gonna try to narrow this down about how generous his messianic complex was. Quote: Nearly all his friends borrowed money, not once but continuously. Never once was a dollar returned. Writers, complete strangers, wrote asking to be subsidized while they were completed nominal. He mailed them monthly checks. When socialist and labor newspapers were in financial trouble, which they almost always were, he sent them subscriptions for all his friends, free articles, and his stories. When it was socialist or labor organizers were arrested, he sent money for the dissent. When he heard of an Australian woman who had lost both sons in the World War, he sent her $50 a month unasked for a long period of time. When an old woman from the mountains of New York wrote him tortured letters of poverty and he had not $1 in the bank, he sent his editor stricken letters imploring him to send the woman money and asked it out of future earnings. When a socialist comrade from Oregon, whom he did not know, wrote that he was bringing his pregnant wife and 4 children to stay on the ranch while he went to Arizona to cure his tuberculosis, Jack wired him back to say he had no cottage or beds in which to put him up. The family had already left Oregon. When they arrived in the ranch, Jack said nothing to his wife, found them a cottage, fed and cared for the family, had the wife delivered of her fifth child, and gave the family back to the father when he returned from Arizona 6 months later, money in hand, unquote. Just like
Sure.
kind of a sucker in some ways, but yeah. Jack was also very, like, unbelievably famous. No matter where in the U.S. And many places abroad, if you were in the vicinity of a newspaper, you'd almost always be able to learn what Jack London was doing with his life. His name was so popular that papers simply made stories up, which never happened again ever in the history of print media, not to one single person. People started to actually impersonate him, and he laughed at this until one day, like a woman named Babe called him about the short affair and said that why didn't he love him anymore? It stopped being cute. Jack also was accused of plagiarism multiple times. It's true that he was heavily influenced by many of his works in contemporary to his life, and you can say that he used them as quote unquote inspiration. The Call of the Wild was almost instantly accused of plagiarism, but there was multiple stories of different authors that involved this topic coming out, right? So this one is just kind of like a vibe check at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. The most egregious case actually was the Iron Heel, which we talked about previous episode, where he took a speech nearly verbatim from a different writer. Jack defended himself because he thought he was quoting his historical text and not somebody's thesis statement about things, but he definitely stole this in the book. The lawsuits that he had never really went anywhere, but it shows just like where he got his work from, right?
Yeah.
Which is like, fine. I don't know if you've ever seen the amount of current day rappers just stealing beats from people and like stuff like
Yeah.
that. It kind of feels the same way in
Well,
some
it's like
ways.
a big thing. It's like a big thing in the stand-up world too. Like, I follow a lot of comedians, and like I'm a big fan of stand-up and everything. And just every once in a while, you're like, man, I've heard this joke before. It's like, oh, I've heard this joke before. Like it just happens.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, stories are stories, right? Like, you don't really know where you get inspiration from sometimes, and sometimes you read something 10 years ago and you go, oh, this is a good idea, and you realize why. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, basically all of his life, Jack would write short stories about the Klondike, which by his late 30s, he grew tired of. I mean, he lived in Canada slash Alaska for 18 months and he got 18 years of stories out of it. He needed new inspiration, and that came via mail through a letter exchange between him and Sinclair Lewis. We talked about him in a previous episode within this series and previous episodes. He's the man who interviewed him at Yale, and he was also America's first Nobel laureate. Lewis sold London a handful of plots for Jack to write. He paid over $50, and through these plots, he wrote a couple of short stories in the novel The Abysmal Brew. It's said that Jack helped Sinclair get his start in writing, actually. Jack would also read and send thoughtful, honest critiques to any writer who sent him their works. These were like from a simple poem to 800-page tomes, and Jack wrote about authors who wanted to shortcut his success. Quote, the man who dreams of artistry and yet thinks it's necessary for somebody else to lick him into shape is a man whose art is doomed to mediocrity, quote unquote. And it's one of those things where it seems like, oh, he's saying that, like you got to pull yourselves by the bootstrap. It's like, no, just do the work and get better at your craft, basically, is what he's
Right.
saying, right? Yeah. He can't get you into the door necessarily, even though he got lucky into the door too. Just one of those things. At this point, it's August 1913. Jack was at his beauty ranch running around with his brown wolf, and his wolf house is nearly complete. He spent $80,000 building the stone building, roughly $2.7 million. Yep, it's August 21st now, right? It's cleanup day, the day where contractors physically clean up all the shit that is required to construct a house.
I
He was
know where they
set
put the beer cans.
some of them, right? He was set to move in within a couple of days, maybe. However, he was awakened and told that his home was set on fire. The whole interior of the house was ablaze by the time he saw it. This was August in California. There's no real water available. As somebody who's lived in this general region, it's very dry at this point. All he could do was watch as his dream home burnt to the ground from the inside out. It was almost certainly an act of arson, for the house was built with stone. So I'd say usually what would happen is only one room, or would burn on fire, or like a wing. If it was something like faulty wiring or an accident happened, then it would be contained. But also another thing that was almost certainly arson was that a wood fire across the yard was also set ablaze, further proving it, right? Like that theory. Jack would never rebuild his dream home, nor will anyone ever know how or why the house burnt down. The house's stone walls and foundations still remain intact to this day and are of state historical land site. State historical site. The rest was just set to flames, permanently destroying
Jesus.
it. Something changed within Jack London after his house burnt down. It devastated him. Most of the house was uninsured, and very little could be salvaged financially or physically. He became more cynical and bitter. He realized that a lot of people he called his friends were just using him for his money, and the financial and emotional stress began to really weigh on him. Film, however, was something that was becoming more popular and common. It's something that he could change his mind, or set his mind on separately. And this is where we get back to the Seawolf, which made it for the big screen, of which Jack had no say about and no money for the adaptation of it.
Aye.
This was because the law at the time sided with the magazines who serialized the novels. As soon as an author sold the rights to the publication, specifically the magazines, those publications retained all the rights to the works. Jack and a fellow writer named Arthur Train then helped to create the Writers' League to get the law changed so writers got their due for their work. This would probably be one of his greatest legal contributions in his life, as authors needed to get paid, for the use of the work. I don't believe that Jack was alive to see it, honestly. But
But
yeah,
Stephen King says thank you.
everybody does, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Train in London for that, or Arthur Train in London. It's just it's it it happened early in film's history, right? 1913 is crazy. Yeah. Yeah. So in May of 1914, war was a brewing, and Jack still wanted to see a shot fired in anger in a war zone. He was sent to cover the Mexican Revolution. Specifically, he was sent to Veracruz to cover the U.S. invasion and occupation to protect moneyed interest and investment of U.S. businesses. We chatted about this. I did with a friend about this invasion briefly during the John Dos Passos episode. Jack would never see a shot fired because, as he always dreamed, because this was just an occupation of a part of Mexico. This was a competent military intervention, after all, run by the War Department, of which it seems like the U.S. forgot how to deal. All he got from this time in Mexico was a few memories, meeting some European diplomats, a handful of plots for short stories he would never be able to write, and amiotic dysentery.
Hell yeah. Finish it up strong there, buddy.
He returned home sick with that vile shitting disease, which pretty much wiped out the rest of his strength. Still, he published 4 books in 1914, which is a record for him, making him, at this point, 41 books published within 14 years.
You do your best thinking on the toilet, Phil. What can I say?
Jack had been begging his ex-wife to, at this point, Bessie, to allow his girls to visit and stay at the ranch for years. He had grown estranged from his 2 girls, and it meant something to him to patch things up, especially his oldest, Joan. When the family did finally visit him, after a ton of back and forth and some reluctance, Charmian raced past them so quickly on her horse while the family was having a lunch picnic. It struck up a cloud of dust that ruined the food entirely. It got to the point where Jack was sending letters to Bessie stating that he'd cut Charmian out of the will entirely and give his estate to the girls and money to her if the girls could live with him at least during the summer. Jack was sending such desperate letters to his family, his ex-wife and his daughter specifically, that it began to be a point of just to sow resentment. That was his point. He was actually trying to what's the word I'm looking for, because I didn't write it down. He was trying to manipulate them in a way that they would start to distrust one another, right? Yeah. It was really, really
sowing
gross.
seeds. Yeah.
It was just nuts. And then it ended up backfiring on him, actually, I think, thankfully for the family and to his dismay, but the family stuck together, really. Charmian, and this is where another point where I know that he was lying about his drinking, because his oldest, Joan, would write later that she said that Jack B started to become a very, very disgruntled man toward the later part of his life, and this is where we're at right now, right? In his late 30s, this is the later part of his life. Charmian turned out to be vainer and more immature as she grew older as well, and the relationship with Jack was strained emotionally. He started having multiple affairs with other women and began drinking by himself, which is never a great sign. He simply stopped being fun to be around, and the things that used to bring him joy, like arguing about socialism, no longer brought him happiness. The only real thing that brought him joy was his ranch. He sunk so much money into it, and even though the intention was to model the ranch for other ranches and farms and not for profit, it was objectively an expensive failure by his own definition, right? Still, this didn't stop Jack building an expensive palace for his pigs, each family of pig having his own stone unit in stone room, right? It's
nice. 3 little pigs. Yep.
They lived better lives than when we did in college.
Indeed.
Jack began to conceive as what I could only describe as an utopian agricultural society where families of workers would live all together and be self-sufficient, which is, of course, something that I thought of when I was like 16, then it never almost pans out. Because the shit hit the metaphorical fan on their ranch. Quoting the biography, quote, misfortune struck his plans almost at once. Though he had gone to the agriculture department of UC Berkeley for advice about his piggery, the entire collection of registered pigs caught pneumonia and died. His prize. I know it gets. This is the first sentence, dude. It's a
like a
paragraph
medical journal.
His prized shorthorn bull, the foundation of his stock, slipped in its pen and dug a horn in the earth, fell over and broke its neck and died. The several blue ribbons, and whom he loved as though he were human. Oh, excuse me. The herd of Angora goats were wiped out by disease. The Shire stallion, which had won him several blue ribbons, and whom he loved as though it were human, was found dead in the field. His entire investment in Shire horses proved to be a mistake, for the hair on their legs made it impossible to keep them clean in providing shape during the winter months. His heavy draft horses, too, had been an error in judgment. They were being replaced by lighter equipment, which lighter horses should be able to pull, and by tractors, which were newer at the time. His 150,000 eucalyptus trees, which were to grow by themselves and net him a fortune after 20 years, were suddenly useless for anything but firewood. All it interested in the Circassian walnut had all disappeared. Unquote. Just,
But man, those fucking chickens, they were doing just fine.
I don't know how else to describe. The man was the luckiest and the unluckiest person in the world. It really, a lot of it is his own bad luck, but he's the definition of you build your own luck, you destroy your own luck. I don't know.
Yeah, Jesus.
Jack began to retreat from society in general, though he would make occasional trips off his farm. His health started to fade, and though he still wrote almost every day those 1,000 words, his body and mind were struggling and fading. He was drinking escalated. He gave up any will to fight for causes and even stepped away from the Socialist Party of America in early 1916. His only real companion towards the end of his life was his stepsister, Eliza, who helped raise him, right? And frankly, was the only person keeping the farm afloat financially in the sense that she was managing it. Every month, Eliza would sit down at the end of the first day of the month, and she and Jack would go over the ledger of the book. And every month, Eliza pulled some kind of financial miracle. They were planning a trip across the country to New York when on November 21st, 1916, the two said goodnight to one another. The next morning, his newest Japanese boy servant went to Eliza and said that Jack was acting funny. He had been in a narcotic state, described as a coma in multiple sources, but he had regained consciousness a couple of times, also from my interpretation of reading these sources. 2 empty vials were found next to him, one of morphine sulfate and another of atropine sulfate. It's assumed he took this due to depression or pain or a combination of two. Either way, these did not react well to his body. The decades of hard drinking plus the laundry list of body-destroying diseases took a toll on him, really. His kidneys failed, and he suffered something called uremia, which is when high urea levels are found in your blood and you literally start sweating out your own piss. I looked this up, and morphine actually doesn't necessarily cause uremia, but if you have underlying medical conditions such as significant kidney damage caused by other diseases and by flagrant alcoholism, then it could cause this to really escalate. Jack London passed away on November 22nd, 1916, at the age of 40 years old. His ashes were buried on one of the hills on his ranch. There was some debate about if this was considered a suicide. It probably isn't. It probably wasn't at all. He just wasn't a healthy man that turned to drugs to treat his depression. And we discussed his health risks at length, but like while we're discussing it, like what my memory of just writing this one sentence out, I didn't look back into it. He definitely had dysentery, malaria, multiple bouts of malnutrition from his early life due to not being able to eat, caught scurvy, extreme sun poisoning, and was an alcoholic. Anything at this point, because I have a couple of more points to wrap this up, but one of the craziest lives I've ever read.
Every facet of it is just crazy, and it's like one of those, if he wasn't a real person, you wouldn't believe it kind of thing, right?
Absolutely. So there's one underlying question I had as soon as like he passed away. What happened to all of Jack London's debts? Eliza London Shepherd, his stepsister, took control of the finances. She was able to pay off creditors for the property through his literary legacy, and Charmian also had wealth and was able to keep property afloat when, after her uncle died, she inherited a lot of wealth, like herself, and lived on the ranch until her death until 1955. And Liza lived nearby as well. The property, or a significant portion of it, has now become a state park in California and has been since 1960. And one of these days I intend to visit it because it's a gorgeous state park by all, everything I've read online. Jack's legacy now is that of a young adult fiction writer, and this is kind of unjust, right? Like and historically inaccurate. I hope I made it clear that he was not only like a influential figure in American history and effectively the first famous writer ever to exist in American ever. He was also a political mover and shaker. I find his best writings his short stories, which is a dying art form. But Jack, even at his time, like revivified the short story. Like it was dying at the time, and he single-handedly caused magazines to sell out editions. When you had a Jack London story within your pages, you sold those pages, and that's why people spent so much money on him. It got to the point where he was more and more than the Archduke Franz Karl of Austria-Hungary died. And yes, he was related to Franz Ferdinand, the Scottish rock band, but totally different person. So like when the Archduke died, like Jack London was more mourned in Austria-Hungary, and he was the Archduke of Austria-Hungary. That's just like remarkable.
Yeah, it's like the rock. He's just a literary rock star.
Yeah. To end this, like I was gonna describe a couple more short stories, but we're pretty well into this. I would say that like one of the books I want to read one of these days is called The Valley of the Moon. It's considered an American classic and it's kind of lost to history. What I would advocate, as opposed to describing, things like I was going to describe To Build a Fire, which is excellent, and also one story called The Minions of Midas. I'll say this one because it makes more sense now because I've called you a minion of Midas. Minions of Midas is those annoying golden blobs that have their next movie now that's in theaters because it's another summer in the 2020s to sell merchandise. This is a story of another postulatory tale that begins with somebody inheriting a vast fortune from a miser who hoarded it. This wealthy man named Eden Hale begins to receive threatening mail from a group of radicals calling themselves the Minions of Midas, stating that if he doesn't distribute his wealth amongst the people he stole it from, who gave their lives for hard work and sacrifice, working people, people will start getting killed. There's also newspaper clippings that detail like these people who are actually dying, not in real life, but like in the fictional ones. Yeah. And each piece of mail, another person is murdered from the Minions of Midas. The reason why I think this is important is because it was adapted to a Netflix thriller drama in Spain in the Spanish language. So like another point where it's popular and just showing just how influential Jack London is, right? This is just another unique story, right? Very much conclusive of this episode. I'm going to just say Jack London is everywhere in this country too, and we don't even know it. I was walking, my daughter, I was outside the Montgomery County Courthouse in Rockville, Maryland, because that was near where my brother was getting married. And outside of it, there were just these plaques that all had these series of quotes, and one of them was a Jack London quote, which I think is really popular and proper to end with. Quote, "The proper function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time." Unquote. That's the end of this series.
Good way to end it.
Yep. Any questions, any thoughts, anything that I hope it inspired you to read more of his work?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it's funny, like the more you say some of these titles and stuff, it's like I recognize them and like maybe I didn't even associate with them or like even remember what I knew it from. But yeah, no, I think now kind of knowing the story and the craziness, right? It's like same thing. Like I said with like the whole rock star thing, it's like some people listen to music because it's good. Some people listen to music because of the person writing it or singing it, or it's like they follow the character along with the art. And this is someone that's definitely you should appreciate the art for what it is, but also for the character behind it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And you should. Both things are valid and true with him. I don't know, man. I didn't expect to get into this tome like when I first picked it up. I'll tell you that
Yeah.
much. I'm glad to have concluded this with you on this way. So I don't think I'm going to do another 5-part series about somebody anytime soon. But there aren't a lot of authors where you can. So
No,
yeah.
this is a good one.
So before I plug my plugs, you can find. I think all of his work, 100% of it now, is on in the public domain. And I thought about this, and if I can get this podcast, popular enough where we can start publishing like things off the public domain that are more obscure, like some of his work, and work with a publisher and just make it like affordable for people and like send it. I think that's like I think that is going to be my dream end goal of this podcast, right? Like of things that like, oh, like this has been buried for years and years and years. Like, why not like start publishing and sending it out? But
Right.
everything with Jack London is now found, I think, pretty much 100%, if not the vast majority, on online that you can just look up and you can find it, like it's out there. So, yeah, I'm going to plug my sources. Excuse me, my Patreon. I already said my sources. Lost in the Library at Patreon. Any questions, please send them there, or at Lost in the Library Podcast at Gmail. Follow us on Instagram. And then follow me on Substack at Phil Deptula, where I'm just trying to build out some stuff there constantly. And yeah, it's Project Gutenberg specifically, that website where it has everything. So all his work. Otherwise, dude, thanks for a late night here. This is a late night for me.
All good. All good. Get more than 5.5 hours.
Oh man, I wish that is exactly what I've been getting. Yeah. It sucks. I'm not doing it intentionally. I didn't abandon my kids, to
Yep. All right, buddy.
yeah. All right. Cheers.
Later. Cheers.